Welcome to Quiet Queen's Reckoning. He brought his girlfriend to her mother's retirement celebration. Not a quiet dinner, a gala. 200 people in the ballroom of the Fairmont in Vancouver. Crystal glasses and white orchids, and the kind of lighting that makes everything look like it costs more than it does. He walked in 40 minutes late with her on his arm, and he smiled at the room, the way men smile when they believe the room belongs to them. Nathan Elroy did not know. What no one in that ballroom knew, except the woman being celebrated, and her mother's attorney, was that the papers had already been signed. The restructuring had already been completed. The trust had already been sealed. He had spent 3 years calculating what he stood to gain. He had not once considered what he stood to lose. He was about to find out. Her name was Cecily Ashmore. To the people who moved through her life. Nathan's colleagues, the neighbors on their street in North Vancouver, the women at the fundraising committee she sat on every second Tuesday. She was simply Cecily, the quiet one. The one who brought homemade butter tarts to every meeting and remembered everyone's children's names and never spoke over anyone in a room. She was 38 years old. She drove a Subaru. She wore her hair pulled back most days. She laughed easily and argued rarely, and had the particular quality of stillness that people mistake, almost universally, for contentment. What they did not see, what Nathan had never once looked for in 3 years of marriage, was that Cecily Ashmore was the only child of Patricia Ashmore, founder of Ashmore Medical Logistics, a company that had quietly grown over 30 years into one of the most significant private healthcare supply networks in Western Canada. Patricia operated through holding companies and numbered corporations and a family trust so carefully constructed that her name appeared in no newspaper, no industry ranking, no gala program. She did not believe in announcing money. She believed that the moment you made your wealth visible, you surrendered control of how people responded to you. She had raised her daughter inside this philosophy before Cecily was old enough to name it. And Cecily, who had spent her childhood watching how people's behavior shifted whenever someone connected the Ashmore name to the right context, had understood it completely by the time she was 15. Patricia's husband, Cecily's father, had left when Cecily was 11. He had been handsome and charming and utterly convinced of his own indispensability. He had left for a woman he met at a conference in Calgary, and he had done it without apparent guilt because men who believe their charm is a form of generosity rarely feel guilty about withdrawing it. Patricia had watched him go with the composed expression of a woman who had already made contingency plans. She rebuilt. She always rebuilt. And she raised her daughter to understand that the people who survive disruption are the ones who built deeper foundations than anyone could see. Cecily carried that understanding into her adult life, the way you carry something so familiar you stop noticing the weight. She had met Nathan Elroy at a dinner party in Gastown. On a Saturday evening in January, he was 39, tall, confident in the calibrated way of men who have learned to perform confidence so consistently that they have stopped distinguishing it from the real thing. He worked in commercial real estate development. He spoke fluently about projects and timelines and market conditions. He had opinions about wine and architecture and the political failures of city planning. He asked Cecily questions and listened to the answers with his full attention, which she later understood was a technique rather than a temperament. But she was 35 and tired of detecting techniques, and his attention felt, in that moment, like warmth. They dated for 8 months. Cecily observed him the way she observed everything, steadily, without announcing what she was doing. She noticed how he handled a canceled reservation. She noticed how he spoke about his previous relationships, always the architect of his own victimhood, always the reasonable one, responding to unreasonable women. She noticed that he never once asked her about money, which she initially read as refreshing, and later understood was something else entirely. He was not incurious about money. He was incurious about hers, because he had already assessed it and found it unimpressive. A woman who worked part-time at a literacy nonprofit and drove a 5-year-old Subaru and lived in a modest rental in Lower Lonsdale was not a financial prospect. She was a companion. A pleasant, attractive, uncomplicated companion who would enhance his domestic life without complicating his professional one. They married in the spring. Cecily organized everything. Nathan contributed enthusiasm and a guest list composed almost entirely of development contacts he wanted to impress. The marriage settled into its shape quickly. Cecily managed the household. The mortgage paid through a personal account she maintained carefully. The bills, the insurance, the social calendar, the grocery orders, the cleaning schedule, the birthday gifts for Nathan's mother selected and wrapped by Cecily and signed with both their names. Nathan came home to clean counters and prepared meals, and a wife who asked about his day and engaged with the answer and did not require the question to be returned. He existed inside the structure of her effort, the way a guest exists inside a well-run hotel, enjoying the result, never considering the work. Patricia noticed everything about Nathan Elroy within the first 40 minutes of meeting him. At the small dinner Cecily hosted 3 weeks after the wedding, she said nothing. She poured her own tea and asked Nathan polite questions about his projects and watched how he answered, which was always about himself, always about momentum, always pitched slightly louder than the room required. On her drive home, she called Cecily. "He's performing," Patricia said. "Not for you. For the room. When a man performs that consistently, he's managing an image rather than living a life." Cecily had been quiet on the phone. She said she would pay attention. "Right." Patricia said, "You will know the right person because the room gets quieter when you're with them, not louder." 18 months into the marriage, Cecily understood exactly what her mother had meant. She found the first evidence on a Wednesday afternoon. She was not looking for it. She was filing receipts, a task she did monthly. With the same patient attention she applied to most things, and a charge appeared on the shared credit card that she did not recognize. A hotel in Yaletown, one night. Charged on a Friday, when Nathan had told her he was in Kelowna for a project meeting. She held the statement for a moment. She set it down. She finished the filing. She made dinner. She said nothing. She began to document. Over the following 2 months, she assembled what her mother's legal team would later describe as an exceptionally thorough record. Credit card charges at hotels and restaurants Nathan had not mentioned. Calendar inconsistencies. A name that appeared repeatedly in his phone, visible once when she carried it to him from the kitchen table, and the screen lit up before he reached her. Saved as Tara W., with a lipstick emoji that Nathan would never have used ironically. The woman was Tara Winslow, 29, a junior associate at a competing development firm. Cecily found her LinkedIn profile in 4 minutes. She was blonde and ambitious and had the particular kind of photogenic confidence that registers immediately in professional headshots. The affair had been running, as best Cecily could reconstruct from the documentary record, for approximately 5 months before she discovered it. She did not confront Nathan. She called her mother. Patricia already knew. Not from surveillance. Not this time. From simple experience. "I noticed the way he looked at his phone at Christmas," she said. "Not with urgency. With anticipation. It's a specific expression. I recognized it." "What do I do?" Cecily said. Patricia was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice had the quality of someone stating something structural rather than emotional. "You change nothing. You document everything. You give me time to do what needs to be done, and you let him keep believing that he is the most observant person in any room he enters. He will accelerate, Cecily. Men like Nathan always do. They reach a point where they become impatient with the performance of their own double life. When that happens, he will make it obvious, and obvious is useful." Cecily stayed on the phone for a while after that without speaking. "Your mother's retirement celebration is in 4 months, Patricia added. "Whatever is going to happen will have happened by then, one way or another." Cecily went back inside. She set the table. She poured 2 glasses of water. She greeted Nathan when he came through the door and asked how the Burnaby site meeting had gone and listened to his answer with the same steady attention she had always given him. And said nothing about the hotel receipt, or the document she had started on her encrypted laptop, or the conversation with her mother that had just set into motion a financial that Nathan Elroy could not have imagined in his most anxious moment. Patricia Ashmore spent the following 3 months doing what she had spent 30 years learning to do. She restructured assets that had been held vehicles, with even peripheral connections to Cecily's married life, were identified and migrated. Trust documentation was reviewed and reinforced. Every financial thread that could be pulled at in a divorce proceeding was either severed or protected with instruments that would take an opposing legal team months to understand. Patricia worked with her attorney, a woman named Joanne Kessler, who had practiced family and estate law in British Columbia for 26 years, and who had, in that time, developed a particular efficiency with cases involving wealthy women and the men who had underestimated them. Patricia also had Nathan's financial behavior monitored, not intrusively, simply noted. And what was noted was a man who, increasingly confident in his wife's obliviousness, had begun making preparations. He had opened a personal investment account at a separate institution. He had begun transferring small amounts from their joint savings, below the threshold that typically triggered concern, but consistent and directional. He had consulted a family law attorney in Richmond, someone far enough from their social circle that he believed it would go unnoticed. He was building his exit. He had been building it. Joanne Kessler estimated from the documentation owned for approximately 7 months. He believed he was several moves ahead. He had not understood that the board he was playing on did not belong to him. Then Patricia was diagnosed. Not cancer this time. A serious cardiac event in late August, followed by a recovery that her doctors described as good, but that Patricia herself described, characteristically, as clarifying. She used the 3 months of modified activity that followed to do the things she had been meaning to do for years. She finalized the trust. She met with Cecily 4 times in September and October. Meeting transferring knowledge and authority, and the kind of strategic understanding that could not be transmitted in any document, but only through conversation between 2 people who had always spoken plainly to each other. She introduced Cecily formally to Joanne Kessler. She reviewed the file on Nathan one final time. She added a handwritten note to the cover page, in the small, precise script she had used since business school. He will come to the celebration looking for an angle. Let him. The doors are already locked. Patricia's retirement celebration was held on a Friday evening in November at the Fairmont Hotel, Vancouver. 200 guests, a ballroom, ivory and gold, chandeliers throwing warm light across the faces of 30 years of colleagues, partners, community figures, and the quiet, substantial network that Patricia had built through decades of work conducted almost entirely below the level of public visibility. She stood at the entrance, receiving guests in a deep green dress, her white hair elegant, her expression the composed warmth of a woman who had earned every person in that room. Cecily stood beside her for the first part of the evening. She wore charcoal silk. Only jewelry was her grandmother's brooch, a small gold maple leaf her grandmother had received as a gift in 1967 and worn for 40 years, pinned at the collar. She spoke to people she knew. She smiled. She held her champagne glass and watched the room with the particular attentiveness of someone who knows the evening contains more than one event. Nathan arrived 43 minutes after the doors opened, not alone. Tara Winslow walked in beside him. She wore a red dress that was not quite appropriate for the occasion, not inappropriate enough to be accidental. Her hand was in Nathan's. Her chin was lifted. She walked into the retirement gala of Cecily's mother, the way people walk into rooms they believe they own. The room noticed, not loudly, in a way that rooms of composed, senior professionals notice things. A slight recalibration of attention, conversations that continued but shifted register, the specific quality of collective awareness moving through the space like a current beneath still water. Cecily saw them from across the room. She watched Nathan move toward her with Tara beside him, past the table of photos documenting 30 years of Ashmore medical logistics, past the guests who had known Patricia since the company had 7 employees and operated out of a rented office in Coquitlam. She felt something settle inside her, not humiliation, not anger, a kind of precise, structural recognition. The recognition of a woman watching something she had prepared for arrive exactly as anticipated. Nathan stopped 2 meters from her. He did not release Tara's hand. He looked at Cecily with the expression of a man performing sympathy while radiating something else entirely beneath it. Cecily, quite the evening for your mum. Cecily looked at him, then at Tara, then back at Nathan. Her voice was level. Thank you both for coming. She turned back to the guest she had been speaking with and continued the conversation she had been having before they arrived. She did not look at Nate again for the remainder of the evening. Nathan interpreted this as confirmation. He interpreted her composure as evidence of defeat, her politeness as proof that she lacked the capacity to fight back. He spent the rest of the gala at a table near the bar, networking with the professional intensity of a man who believed he was about to need a stronger network than the one he currently had. He left before the speeches. He texted Cecily at 11:17. "I think we should talk this week." She read the message. She set her phone face down on the nightstand. She slept. In the 3 weeks following the gala, Nathan accelerated exactly as Patricia had said he would. He stopped coming home on 2 consecutive nights without explanation. When Cecily texted to ask where he was, he responded eventually, briefly, with the phrasing of a man rehearsing his exit. He contacted his Richmond attorney on a Monday and instructed him to begin filing. He wanted the house. He believed he was entitled to half of whatever Patricia had left Cecily from the business. A business he had consistently referred to, at dinner parties, as your mum's little operation. He wanted it settled by spring. He believed Cecily would accept whatever terms were offered because, in 3 years, she had always accepted whatever he had decided. He also did something that Joanne Kessler had predicted with the weary accuracy of someone who has watched this pattern many times. He transferred $34,000 from their joint savings into his personal investment account on a Tuesday afternoon. He did this without telling Cecily. He did this because he considered the money partly his and believed the transfer was a reasonable preliminary step. He did not know the account was monitored. He did not know the transfer was logged in real time. He did not know that initiating this transfer after having already consulted a divorce attorney constituted a specific legal vulnerability under British Columbia family law that his own attorney would later describe in a phone call that Nathan would replay in his memory for years as an extraordinarily self-defeating decision. Cecily watched all of it from the house that Nathan believed was jointly owned, but was in fact connected to a trust. She drank her morning coffee and read Joanne Kessler's updates and said nothing. The silence was not emptiness. It was the silence of someone who has already done everything that needed to be done and is simply waiting for the physics to finish. 3 weeks after the gala, Joanne called. He moved money. $34,000. Personal account. No authorization. Cecily closed her eyes. That's what my mother said he would do. Your mother is rarely wrong about people. A pause. Emily. Combined with the attorney consultations and the asset transfers we've already documented, we have a clear pattern of dissipation of family property during the marriage. In BC, that shifts the equitable distribution analysis significantly. Meaning, when we walk into that room, he will not be negotiating with leverage. He'll be negotiating from a position so compromised that his own counsel will advise him to accept whatever we offer and consider himself fortunate. Cecily looked out the kitchen window. The garden her mother had helped her plant the previous spring. The ornamental grasses were dry and pale now, late autumn, but the roots were deep and they would hold. Schedule it, she said. The meeting took place on a Thursday morning in December, at the offices of Kessler Fairweather, on the 22nd floor of a tower in downtown Vancouver, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Burrard Inlet, the mountains behind North Vancouver, white-capped and indifferent. The conference table was walnut. The chairs were dark leather. The room had the specific, expensive quiet of a place where large sums of money are regularly redistributed. Nathan arrived first. He wore a gray suit, the one Cecily had taken to the dry cleaner 4 times over the course of their marriage. He was accompanied by his attorney, a man named Gerald Park, who had 20 years of family law experience, and who had assured Nathan that the proceedings would be straightforward. Gerald Park had not yet seen the file Joanne Kessler was carrying. He had not yet been informed that the woman he had been retained to negotiate against was the sole beneficiary of a trust connected to a private healthcare logistics company with annualized revenue exceeding $47 million. Later, he had spent the previous week preparing to negotiate over a jointly owned house and some savings accounts. He was about to have a very different morning than the one he had planned. Cecily arrived at 9:10. Dark blazer, white blouse, and a grandmother's brooch. Hair back, owned. She looked exactly as she had always looked to Nathan. Composed, quiet, manageable. Joanne Kessler came in behind her, silver-haired and unhurried, and placed her briefcase on the table with the particular deliberateness of someone who has never lost track of what the briefcase contains. Nathan leaned back slightly. He looked at Cecily with the expression of a man who believes a meeting is a formality. Cecily. She sat down. She folded her hands on the table. She waited. Gerald Park opened the proceedings efficiently. His client sought equitable division of all marital assets, including the family home, all joint accounts, and any assets received from or connected to the estate of Patricia Ashmore. He emphasized Patricia Ashmore. He said it with the weight of someone who believes he is naming the prize. Joanne Kessler listened without expression. When Gerald finished, she opened her briefcase and removed a single folder. She set it on the table with no particular ceremony. Thank you, Mr. Park. Before we discuss any division, I need to establish the actual asset landscape of this marriage. Gerald nodded. Nathan shifted almost imperceptibly. The property at 1847 Queensberry Avenue, North Vancouver. Mr. Elroy believes this is jointly owned marital property. It is not. The property is titled to the Ashmore Family Trust, established in 2019, 14 months prior to the marriage. Mr. Elroy's name appears on no title document, no mortgage instrument, and no associated filing. Legally, he has been a tenant in that property for the duration of the marriage, in a home owned by a trust he has no claim to. The room was very quiet. Nathan's expression did not move immediately. There was a delay of perhaps 4 seconds between the words and his comprehension of what they meant. The joint savings account at RBC. Mr. Elroy transferred $34,000 from this account to a personal investment account on November 19th, without his spouse's knowledge or consent. This occurred after he had already retained divorce counsel, establishing deliberate intent to remove marital assets. Under BC's Family Law Act, this constitutes dissipation of family property. We have the transfer records, the timestamps, and the documentation of his prior legal consultations. Gerald Park's pen had stopped moving. He looked at his client. Nathan's jaw had tightened slightly. Mr. Elroy also altered the beneficiary designation on a jointly held investment account in September, removing Mrs. Elroy's name without disclosure. We have the original and the amended filing. Joanne turned a page. Now, regarding Patricia Ashmore and the Ashmore Family Trust. She looked at Nathan directly. Her expression was professional and entirely without warmth. Mr. Elroy appears to believe that his wife received, or will receive, a modest inheritance from a small family business. I need to correct this assumption. She placed a second document on the table. Ashmore Medical Logistics operates across 4 provinces. Its assets, held entirely within the Ashmore Family Trust, are valued at approximately $94 million in total holdings, including real property, operating assets, and an investment portfolio. The trust was established in 2009. $1 of trust assets has ever been commingled with marital funds. Under British Columbia family law, trust assets are not family property and are not subject to division. Gerald Park stared at the document. He performed a visible series of mental recalculations. None of them produced a result he could use. Nathan stared at Cecily. His mouth was slightly open. The confidence that had carried him through 3 years of marriage, the certainty that he was the more strategic person in the relationship, the assumption that his quiet wife would accept whatever he decided, was leaving his face, the way light leaves a room when someone turns off the switch. Steadily, all at once. 90. He stopped. He started again. 984 million. Cecily looked at him. She did not speak. She did not need to. The silence she had maintained for 3 years, which Nathan had read as passivity, was revealing itself now as what it had always been. The silence of a woman who had nothing to prove because everything had already been arranged. Joanne continued. Given the documented pattern of financial misconduct, the unauthorized transfer, the altered beneficiary designation, the undisclosed legal consultations during the marriage, Mrs. Elroy's legal team will be initiating a claim for full recovery of dissipated family property, plus associated damages. Mr. Elroy's exposure, conservatively calculated, exceeds $80,000. This figure does not include costs. Gerald Park set his pen on the table. He turned to Nathan. His expression was the expression of a lawyer who has just understood that he was given incomplete information by the person paying him. Nathan, I think we need to speak privately. Nathan did not move. He was looking at Cecily. His eyes were moving across her face, the way someone's eyes move when they are searching for a door in a wall that doesn't have one. He was looking for the woman he had married, the agreeable one, the one who organized his life and thanked him for his presence in it, and never pushed back on anything. She wasn't there. "You knew," he said. His voice was lower than usual. "This whole time. You knew all of it." Cecily looked at him for a moment, and she spoke. Her voice was the same voice she had used for 3 years. Steady, unhurried. "I knew everything, Nathan. I knew about Tara. I knew about the Richmond attorney. I knew about the account transfers. I knew about every hotel, and every dinner, and every night you said you were somewhere you weren't, while I paid the bills and managed your home and showed up to every obligation that had both our names on it." She paused. "You brought her to my mother's retirement celebration. I walked in holding her hand in a room full of people who have known my family for decades. You stood in that ballroom and you thought you were watching me lose." She stood. She picked up her bag. "You were watching me finish." She turned and walked to the door. Joanne Kessler gathered her documents and followed. At the door, Cecily paused. She did not turn around. "The locksmith will rekey Queensberry Avenue by Monday. Things will be packed and delivered to whatever address you give to Joanne's office. The joint accounts are frozen as of this morning, pending resolution of the dissipation claim." She opened the door. "Goodbye, Nathan." The door closed. Nathan sat in the leather chair in the conference room on the 22nd floor and looked at the closed door and the walnut table and the document, with the trust summary still sitting in the center of it. Gerald Park was saying something. The harbor was visible through the windows, gray-green and enormous. Seaplanes moved across the low cloud. The city continued. Nathan's life came apart over the following month, with the mechanical consistency of a structure that has lost its load-bearing support. The house was rekeyed. His belongings arrived at Tara's apartment in 11 boxes. His firm's compliance process, triggered by the divorce filing, identified the pending legal action and placed him on administrative review. Tara, who had chosen Nathan as a specific version of Nathan. The version with the career trajectory and the North Vancouver property and the confident ease of a man who appeared to own his circumstances, made a practical reassessment. She was 29. The baby they had been loosely discussing was still hypothetical. A man sitting on her couch in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon, watching his phone with the expression of someone waiting for news that kept not arriving, was not the man she had chosen. She told him on a Wednesday. Quietly, without drama, with the tone of someone closing a door that has been open too long. He sat in his car outside her building for a long time. He had no house. He had no professional standing. He had no wife. He had no mistress. He had the suit Cecily had dry cleaned, and the briefcase she had given him for their first anniversary, and the memory of 3 years of domestic comfort that had been in its entirety the product of another person's labor. A person he had not seen clearly, a person he had not looked at. 7 months after the divorce was finalized, Cecily Ashmore stepped fully into the life she had been quietly managing from the edges. She joined the board of the Ashmore Foundation, her mother's philanthropic vehicle, and expanded its remit to include housing access for women leaving difficult domestic situations, funding for community health navigation programs, and educational support for first-generation students of BC in Alberta. She committed $12 million over 4 years. She hired a director, 2 program managers, and a communications team. She operated with the same methodical attention she had always applied to everything, except now the thing she was attending to had a name and a mandate and a budget, and 12 staff members who arrived every Monday morning. The Globe and Mail ran a profile in the spring. The headline read, "The Quiet Here. How Cecily Ashmore Built a Foundation While No One Was Looking." A piece described her years at the literacy nonprofit, her careful anonymity, her mother's philosophy about wealth and visibility. It did not name Nathan. It did not need to. People who knew them understood. She read the piece over breakfast on a Sunday morning at the kitchen table of a small cottage her mother owned on Gambier Island. Wood and glass, surrounded by arbutus trees and water. She drank her coffee. The inlet was flat and silver in the early light. A heron stood motionless on the dock, doing what herons do which is wait with a patience so complete it looks like absence. On her phone was an encrypted folder she had maintained for 2.5 years. Every document, every receipt, every timestamp, every screenshot. The complete record of what Nathan had done, assembled with the care of a woman whose mother had taught her that documentation was not paranoia but responsibility. She opened it. She scrolled through it once, slowly, the way you walk through a place you already know you're leaving. Not looking for anything, just confirming that nothing remained that she needed to take with her. Then she selected it all. She pressed delete. She confirmed. The screen cleared. She did not delete it because she had forgiven him. Forgiveness was a separate matter, and one she did not feel particularly obligated to resolve on any particular schedule. She deleted it because the file had served its function. It had protected her. It had armed her. It had given her exactly what she needed to walk into that conference room and end things on her own terms, which were the only terms that had ever made sense. And now it was done, and the only reason to keep carrying it was to keep carrying him, and she was finished carrying people who had never thought to ask about the weight. She set the phone down. She looked at the water. The heron was still there, impossibly still, waiting with a conviction that suggested it had never once doubted the outcome. She thought about her mother, about what Patricia had said on the phone the night Cecily called her, when Patricia had already known, when the quiet machinery had already begun. The right person makes the room quieter, not louder. She had not found that person yet. She was not looking, not urgently, not with the sense that finding someone was the point. The point was something else. Something she had arrived at slowly, through years of managing a household and a marriage, and a secret and a grief. And what she had arrived at was this: she had never been small. She had simply been in a space that required her to behave as though she were. And the moment she stopped, the moment she withdrew from the architecture of his comfort and let gravity do the rest, what remained was not wreckage. What remained was her. The coffee was warm. Aaron lifted off the dock without apparent effort, wings spreading wide and slow, and crossed the inlet and disappeared into the tree line on the far shore. The water settled. The morning continued. She was not angry. She was not sad. She was something that did not have a simple name but felt, in the body, like standing on solid ground after a long time on water. Like the specific relief of a person who has stopped pretending to need less room than she actually occupies. She picked up her coffee. She looked at the water. She breathed. Somewhere in Vancouver, on the other side of the inlet, the city was going about its business. Somewhere in that city, Nathan Elroy was going about his, diminished and ongoing. She did not think about him often. When she did, it was not with anger or bitterness, or the particular hollow ache of someone who has been wronged and cannot move past it. It was with something closer to clarity, the clear-eyed recognition of a woman who had been underestimated by someone who mistook her stillness for emptiness, her patience for compliance, her silence for a vacuum he could fill with his own noise. He had been wrong about all of it, and the wrongness had cost him everything he thought he had, which turned out, in the end, to be everything she had built and nothing he had earned. She finished her coffee. She stood. She went inside. The quiet ones are not waiting for permission to take up space. They are simply choosing, very carefully, when